Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and we're back to our regular weekday at 12:30 for 15 minutes SMESec. So we talk about all things security, but delivered in plain English, not Klingon. So we're talking about the 10 stages that we go through, the 10 steps to secure our business. And we talked about step one, actually looking at the information risk on Friday and how we actually look at the risk we've got within our business, the types of information and what would happen if any of them were compromised. What we're moving on today is actually the secure configuration. And I'm just going to bring up my slides again. So secure configuration is our stage two. And there are a number of things that we need to consider when we actually go through this piece. So the first thing is, understanding what we're building and why we're building it, as well as looking at what we've got in place to start with, because we could already have infrastructure in place as well as be looking to develop something new. So one of the things to consider to start with is. So my watch is trying to join in the conversation. So first thing, if we're going to do something new, we need to design, build, maintain, and manage it securely. So it's having that secure piece from the beginning all the way through. So from the design, the build, the maintenance, and also managing that system, we need to think about security. So we're trying to bake security into everything we do. Also, we need to look at the technology and cyber security landscape, because it's constantly evolving. So technology is changing all the time, and also the security threats are changing all the time. And we need to be thinking about how we actually keep in touch with that and make sure what we're doing with end user desktops, with our mobile devices, and also our online system, we're actually keeping up with that. But let's think about some of the benefits if we go down this route of having a secure configuration from the beginning. One is, if we get the security right from the beginning, we actually create systems that are much easier to keep secure and can reduce the need for any costly work in the future that we might need to do. Also, a well architected and configured system will also give us confidence that our security controls are going to mitigate the risks that we've got within our organization, and also the risks that we care about. We talked about this information risk strategy on Friday. We've got to consider the things that we think are important to us. What's going to affect our business the most, and prioritize those. We can't do everything. You can never boil the ocean. You've got to focus on the things that matter. But also, one of the key things is being able to manage those systems and maintain the security over time. Because we're not looking at one point in time, we're not looking at just today. How secure are we today? We want to be secure tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, going forward. Because if we're not, that's when we're going to get some kind of compromise. We're going to be vulnerable to attack. So we need to make sure that we constantly do it. So what we're going to do to do that. So, first thing is understanding what we're going to build and why we're building it. So getting a good feel for what we're trying to achieve, and also, taking account of the risks that we've associated before and what we're willing to accept. So we come up with a model for how we're going to secure the environment. We've also got to consider the lifetime of the project as well. Is this going to be a system we're going to use for the next year, next 3 years, next 5 years? And we need to then adopt into that, not only the security at the beginning, but how we're going to maintain that security, and also maintain, keeping the vulnerability of the system low as we go forward. Also, we need to think about how we're actually going to roll it out and how quickly we're going to do that. So are we going to use some kind of rapid deployment technology? Most software development these days are done using what we call agile techniques. So a process that we can actually look at very, very quick delivery of some kind of functionality for our customer, whether that's an internal user or an external user. The next thing for us to consider is, how do we make these systems easy to maintain and update? And it's really important that we actually make them easy to maintain and update, because going forward, we want the ability to be able to update the features and functionalities of those systems, but also maintaining the security of them as we go forward. And one of the things to think about is, how we go about deploying these? One is, do we start from scratch and we design everything ourselves and get someone to implement it? Get some designer and some software developers to do it, or do we consider using some kind of external service? Because there are lots of things out there, what we call platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and also software as a service, where we can take some kind of cloud service or can deliver a lot of things that we need. And we can also leave the responsibility for some of the actual security to the cloud provider. So if we decide we need, some kind of accounting system, why start from scratch when we can take one of the cloud systems out there from Zero, from QuickBooks, from Sage, from a variety of different, software as a service providers, but mainly focus on the differences, the thing that we need different to what the standard offering is, that's going to make it fit to the requirements of our business. Just focus on, that customization that we need to do. Also, if we actually speak to those cloud providers, they've got hundreds, if not thousands, of customers, and they understand some of the security risks around how they deploy what they do. You know, Using things like multi-form factor authentication is a key thing these days, especially for SaaS services, but also what we call RBAC, so having specific role-based access control services. So we don't give all of our users the same access to the systems. So ensuring we only give them access to the pieces that they need for their part in our business. So if they're in accounts, just give them access to the accounting side of things. If they need to be able to do sales or marketing activity, give them access to those particular pieces of the actual functionality of that service. So not giving the full access, full admin rights to everything. So thinking about that is a key thing. We also need to consider, what's in place and thinking about what exposure we've got to vulnerabilities. So think about where the service that we take or the software we design, and think about how we can implement some kind of mitigation strategy to protect it. We also need to think about user configuration management. So how are they being set up and how are they accessing it? What type of device are they using? Are they using a desktop device, a laptop? Are they using some kind of mobile device like a phone or tablet? So let's think about how we could actually control those. So, managing those desktops, managing those mobile devices to make sure that they're secure and the access to those devices is secure, as well as access to the system. Because if someone gets the ability to access your desktop computer, and they've got then access to the admin rights on your accounting system, they can run rife and steal information, encrypt data. It's going to make it very difficult for you. But if you actually consider how you're accessing it and making sure we protect the devices that we're using to access them, again, we're making it much more difficult for the company to, well, not the company, the hacker to get access to our company information and data. The next thing is make the compromises and disruption difficult to do. So we've got to think about this is, how do we actually make it more difficult for the hacker to actually access the systems? So one of them is creating what we call a layered approach to security. So different layers of control and different layers of security to make it harder for the hacker to get into the system in the first place. But also, what we need to do is what we call reduce the attack surface. So the attack surface is how many different places we can attack, if we go into it as a hacker. So by reducing the surface, by turning off different services and configurations that we don't require. One of the things that a lot of Windows devices have is the ability to remotely connect to the desktop, so using RDP, so remote desktop services to actually connect to it. Most people don't use these, and it's actually a way that someone could effectively access your machine and take control of it. So by disabling RDP on your desktop machines, that's going to reduce one point where a hacker could access. Using things like Macs and Linux servers, as one of the areas is SSH and Telnet. So if we don't need to remotely access the command line for any of these systems, let's disable it so that the hacker doesn't have that ability to use that one interface to get into the system. Also, how we configure the accounts and minimizing the number of accounts that are configured on each of these systems as well. Again, to reduce the different places that the hacker can attack, and also reducing the amount of software that's been installed on these systems. Let's only install the things that we need installed and need for the actual delivery of the service or use by the end user of that particular piece, but also any demo capabilities, because a lot of times hackers are looking for these soft underbellies I mentioned a couple of times. So they're looking for demo capabilities, software that might have been installed and not configured correctly, to access your machine. So by turning all these off, what we can do is reduce the attack surface. Also, applying a secure configuration to all of our systems, that be servers or end user devices. Let's make sure that the configuration is secure. Make sure all passwords are complex and not reused on multiple systems. The other thing is not trusting data from different configurations and service and sources. So one of the problem we could have is we built an infrastructure. We've got multiple systems, and we effectively inherently trust each one of them. So if we get a connection from one system to the next, we trust it. You know, that could be an attack. It could be a compromised system that's been connected to, and then we're doing this lateral movement, so moving sideways between one system and another. Let's ensure that we actually protect those connections between these machines as well, not just assume because it's internal systems in our data center or internal end user desktops within our office facility on our local network that they're inherently secure, because they may not be. Let's make sure that we protect and control access between those systems as well. Also, we need to think about is our email domains. Make it harder for people to send emails that look like they're from us. So making sure that we're securing our domains and our email infrastructure so that the hackers can't get in and spoof and create emails that look like they're from individuals within the business and send them to people to, get hold of access details, configuration information, those kind of things again. So trying to minimize the ways that the hackers can actually get into the system. Also, let's think of products and implement products that have been designed to be secure from the beginning. Making sure that we're using the most safe products that we can to actually do this. And again, utilizing simple ways for users to access the systems. One of the problems we get when we make it difficult for end users is they find ways around it. They find workarounds that then could actually make our systems vulnerable. I think I mentioned recently about people writing down passwords because we made it too complicated for them and too difficult for them. Use things like password managers to ensure that they can do it and make it easy for the end user to do the right thing. Simple things like multi-factor authentication or MFA systems. You see systems like Duo come up and say, "Is this you? Is it okay to connect?" And you just click a tick box or press an X, a red X, if you don't want that to happen, rather than having to find numbers, sending text message and things, and putting codes in. Make it as simple as possible for the end user to be able to use the system, so they don't have to find ways to get around it and ways that's going to make it more difficult as well. The other thing is, reducing the impact of a compromise. So if we do get a compromise in some way, so someone gets in there, make it so that we understand it's happening, so we can detect it. Things like communication flows, so we can actually see that there's an issue straight away, using monitoring tools to identify that there's an issue and a compromise, so we can deal with it quickly, stop it in its track, and roll it back is a key thing. And there are a number of different technologies that can be used for this. We use a technology that gives end user detect and response capabilities called Sentinel-1. So you can actually see there's a problem, stop the problem in its track, and then roll back to where you were before that started. but also monitoring logs. So every bit of IT infrastructure you have in your system creates logs, and we can actually get these logs and analyze them to understand what's happening. But it also gives us the ability to investigate afterwards to understand what's happened so it doesn't happen again. So we can put some measures in place to stop it happening again. The other thing is make it easy to detect and investigate those. I've just covered that one anyway. So we need to make sure that we can see it's happening and do something about it. And again, I go into the analytics of it and investigate what's happened so we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Our final one is safely develop and manage our systems. Because we need to be able to manage the actual development process or the implementation process if we're taking on some kind of third party product through a software service delivery model or something else, and make sure that when we deploy it, it's as secure as it can be. We need to secure the development and deployment process. We need to also gain trust in the devices we're using to manage those systems. So, going through that process of using some kind of device management product so we understand that the system, the actual tablet, phone, end user desktop, end user laptop is protected to start with, but also understand that we can actually see what's happening and detect an issue as well using these EDR products, so endpoint detection and response products to protect those. But also, protecting the management interfaces. One of the problems we can get is that users have got too high a privilege within a system, and if they're compromised, the hacker can use those higher levels of availability to administrative interfaces and that high level of privilege to actually get across lots of our infrastructure and compromise it. And if someone's going to go down the route of some kind of ransomware attack, the more access to the systems they've got, the better for them. They can actually encrypt and lock down as much as possible to then force us into going down the route of paying them or a very expensive process, entirely process of recovering from it, unless we've got the right measures in place that we can detect, we can stop, and we can roll back from those kind of issues. So we're going to move on to tomorrow on to our next piece, which is network security and talking about how we ensure that the network itself is secure. So we've talked about a lot of the devices and the services that are sitting on that network and how we're actually controlling those, but the network itself, and that's not only just the network that's local to us, so the office LAN that connects all of our devices together. That could also be our internet links, our wide area network links as well. So we need to protect those. So hopefully that's been of interest today. Please join me again tomorrow to go through network security, and we'll kick that off as normal at 12:30 tomorrow for around about 15 minutes. And again, hopefully delivered in English rather than Klingon. Thank you very much.